All buildings tell a story. Some buildings become well known for the stories they tell and become places of tourism or even places of pilgrimage. Some of us here will have travelled great distances to see such places. The Eiffel Tower in Paris, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, or perhaps the Taj Mahal in India. Closer to home, we have a few iconic structures of our own. I can't help but think of the Beehive in Wellington, close to where I grew up. And dare I say it, there is that edifice looming over us only next door, the Sky Tower. Perhaps you are more interested in famous ruins that speak of past civilizations, such as the Colosseum in Rome or Angkor Wat in Cambodia. There are remnants of other constructions here in Aotearoa that are also very interesting. As a child, I frequently visited Te Porere Redoubt on the Central Plateau, where Te Kuti held out against government forces. It was here that I began to learn some of the stories of the New Zealand Wars and how they continue to shape our history today. All of these places and structures and many others tell us all sorts of things, from human history to the story of ambition and progress. There are buildings that tell violent stories and some that were created as monuments to love. Some buildings inspire us with their grandeur, while others speak of humble beginnings. Like other buildings, this church of St. Matthew in the city tells many stories. Like other churches, the original plans for this building would have created a footprint in the shape of a cross. However, that design would not have fitted on the land that was available for this building, which is why we ended up with these wide side aisles that were not actually part of the original plan. They couldn't make the long church that was envisaged, so instead we went sideways. This church is built from limestone, one of only a handful of buildings in this country to be built from such a material. The vaulted roof is uncommon in this part of the world and much more reminiscent of the great cathedrals of Europe. The intention of such a design is to convey a sense of awe. The idea that we are very, very small and God is very, very big. It just so happens that this vaulted roof is quite good when it comes to the acoustics of the building, making it the perfect venue for all kinds of music. And music, of course, is a very big part of the St. Matthew's story. If you read the different plaques on the walls or look at the different windows or even some of the pieces of art in this church, you will find stories of all sorts of different people whose lives are in some way connected to this place. We in fact have a chapel right here, remembering the people of St. Thomas's Church. We even house memorials for those who died in wars, as well as those who died from HIV/AIDS in the time before new treatments changed the trajectory of that pandemic. There are other places that our stories are found too. Our Instagram account regularly shares the stories of today, weddings, concerts, and many other special occasions are part of the ongoing story of this place. And there are the memories of so many people, memories of services, memorials, protests, and dare I say, even the odd controversy that still live in this place. They are all part of our story. But there are stories we may not feel so comfortable with as well. Having been here for almost 2 years now, I have heard stories from a number of visitors to this church that aren't as easy to talk about as the stories I have just touched on. For some in our community, this church is and remains a symbol of colonisation. For them, this distinctly European architecture that was imported from the other side of the world by people who came to live here is a constant reminder that there was a time in this country's history when such things did not exist. Some understand the story of this building as one of another culture dominating and suppressing the indigenous people of Aotearoa. And there is a fair point there, because the history of Christianity in this land is wrapped up with the history of people coming from another part of the world and imposing their worldview upon people who were already here. As an Anglican priest of Pākehā descent, that is a story I have not always done the best job at listening to in the past. There are moments I can think of in certain conversations I think, and I can't help but think of one of my primary school teachers who would have said, "Richard, do you really have your listening ears on?" I have inherited a bunch of cultural baggage that wants to explain away the harm of colonisation. In my haste to move past stories that have challenged what my understanding of history was, I mistakenly suggested things like, my ancestors came here with good intentions, with little to no awareness of the colonial project of which they were a part. The mistake here is that we cannot simply explain away the past, but more than that, such stories which can appear reasonable, or such counter stories, they might sound reasonable to us, but they are actually unreasonable because they silence the voice of Indigenous people. The point I am wishing to make is that there are a great diversity of stories held within this place. Some stories, like our history of protest, are so good we don't just tell them, we shout them from the rooftops. But some stories, like the story of colonisation, are difficult, they are uncomfortable, and they require much more from us. The first and most important part of that process is that we listen to such stories. As a community, we need to make room for all the different stories of this place and to treat them with equal reverence, because they are all part of the fabric of who we are. The truth of who we are is not only found in the stories we like to tell, but through all the diverse stories attached to this place. To try to convince ourselves or others that there is only one true story about this community and what we stand for is itself an act of colonisation. Because that is what colonisation does. Colonisation upholds one viewpoint, one way of being, one version of the truth, and imposes it upon everyone. But knowing that gives us an alternative. Instead of imposing one way of being, we can celebrate many ways of being. Instead of seeking to convince or convert, we can listen and be transformed ourselves. Instead of preserving past understandings, we can interrogate them, deconstruct them, and find new ways to move into the future. To engage with the world in such a way is to transform who we are, so that we can become a decolonising church. A church that truly becomes a place for all. A truly decolonising church is one that doesn't simply claim to honour the treaty and the principles of partnership it embodies. We have to be brave enough to live that commitment. Last year, our opposition to the Treaty Principles Bill was a good start. But the work of listening to our treaty partners and seeking to uphold the partnership is ongoing, because challenges like the Treaty Principles Bill will come again. And with such challenges, there will be opportunities to live partnership by honouring the treaty. That work begins with this community looking in the mirror and daring to ask ourselves, can we do better?